I want to start out by saying the reason we're here is not because we don't care gravely about human trafficking. It's very important for us to note that human trafficking is a priority of ours. Again, my name is Sydney. I'm with the Sex Worker Solidarity Network. We work with human trafficking victims. We see their struggles and their pain. What we want to see is a real solution. Unfortunately, the Bathhouse Ordinance that we are opposing right now is not it. So to tell us a little bit more about that, I want to pass the mic to D'Angelo. D'Angelo is with the Restorative Justice Coalition and has done extensive research into criminalization.
Thank you, Sydney. My name is Angel D'Angelo, and I'm with the Restorative Justice Coalition. Obviously, as Sydney expressed, human trafficking is a horrible crime against human beings, and that's not something that we want to tolerate. But another thing that we don't want to tolerate is state violence against victims of human trafficking. The ordinance that's being proposed empowers the Tampa Police Department to perform raids and arrests against people who may be victims of human trafficking. According to the National Survivor Network, 90% of the victims they surveyed of human trafficking reported facing an arrest by a local law enforcement department. As a result, 70% of those that were arrested were branded with a permanent criminal record. They were unable to get that expunged despite the fact that they were victims of human trafficking. To make matters worse, only 40% of those that were arrested could actually account for the fact that their trafficker was charged and arrested with anything. Most of their traffickers were charged for crimes not related to human trafficking and had their charges dropped. At the end of the day, what that means is these victims of human trafficking were branded with criminal records which left them barriers to employment, housing, education, federal benefits, and other services and needs. As a result, these individuals were forced to continue working in sex trafficking because they've been branded as criminals. In the United States, as the Restorative Justice Coalition works to fight, the criminal justice system brands you permanently. In states like Florida, you're unable to vote. You're unable to get public housing based on certain crimes. You're unable to get sustainable jobs. So as a result, the ordinance that the city of Tampa is proposing will actually enable sex traffickers. What I mean by that is because they're not going to actually arrest traffickers, they're only going to arrest the victims, and the victims are now branded with a harsh criminal record, can't get employment or housing. They're going to continue working in the sex trade because they still have to survive. So the Restorative Justice Coalition is standing here today not in support of human trafficking, actually the complete opposite. We're standing in complete opposition of human trafficking. But we want to stand in solidarity with victims so that way they have self-determination to get out of the horrible crisis they're in without being permanently branded and victims of the prison industrial complex. Thank you.
Yeah. Awesome. Next we're going to have Sadie Dean, also with the Restorative Justice Coalition. She's going to tell us a little bit about the racial disparity inherent in criminalization of sex work.
Thank you, Sid. Good evening, everyone. So we understand that this ordinance serves as a vehicle for police to target, over-survey, and criminalize communities in the margins. These communities include immigrant communities, people of color, trans folk, and low-income communities. So I'm going to turn to the crowd, and I'm going to ask you all to look at your neighbor and go ahead and look at yourself and identify. If you can identify with at least two of these, raise your hand. Oh, I'm sorry. So people of color, trans folk, immigrants, and low income. Okay. All right. So we have to understand who we are fighting for, those who are most vulnerable in this. So thank you guys for taking part of that. So today, licensed massage therapists and sex workers are being criminalized and targeted as a result of this ordinance. As I'm sure we're all aware, this ordinance is an attack on vulnerable, marginalized communities, much like the attack on the self-determination of people of color and other folks within America, a continuing battle that has been going on for hundreds of years. So in a country where immigrants are offered little to no job opportunities and are ostracized from taking a part of active society, our police make it their aim to criminalize them. Yearning for some life work, they're pushed to a lot of the margins in businesses like massage therapy and things of that nature. Their self-determination is stripped from them, and I know D'Angelo just mentioned that, and I just want to reinforce that. Our businesses of color are suffering as a result of this ordinance. Additionally, in a country that openly terrorizes queer and trans folk from living their lives as they see fit, police target, harass, criminalize, and murder a whole community of these individuals. See, when you are a trans woman of color especially, you are virtually unable to find any employment due to hostile work environments and misunderstanding and ignorance of individuals. You are faced with the decision to survive the best way you know how, and oftentimes that means being pushed into this work. Trans women of color make up 29% of all of the homicide victims as a result of sex work, and they are arrested at 2 times the amount of white women. So I just, in this, want us to remember who we're fighting for and make sure that we understand that communities of color are most marginalized and most affected in this ordinance. Thank you.
Yeah. All right. Next we have Kara with National Nurses United and the Democratic Socialists of America. Kara?
And through my work, I've cared for thousands of people in the Tampa Bay community. Nurses are on the front lines of public health and safety. Nurses' values advocate for not only health care for all, but for our patients to have safe places to work and to live as well. Reviving this Bathhouse Ordinance is harmful to the working class community because it excuses the real criminals that are human traffickers. It places blame on the actual victims of human trafficking. It disenfranchises those victims. Even worse, this ordinance will enable sex traffickers to continue their work without being targeted, and the victims will be backed further into a corner, forced to remain with their traffickers. When victims of human trafficking come through our emergency departments, that may be the only opportunity for them to feel safe and speak up, receive the help that they need. Nurses can be trained to identify victims of human trafficking all day long, but unless the victim is empowered to speak up, why would they? The victim knows there's no immunity, no recourse if they speak out, so they stay silent. Why would a victim of human trafficking speak up in unsafe conditions when they know they will just be thrown into jail? The system will fail them, and they will have to go back to their trafficker who walks away scot-free. Why would a victim speak out to a system that rejects them in favor of the trafficker, knowing that they will be jailed and without any choice but to go back to them once they're released? City Council, I urge you to drop the ordinance. If you actually want to help people, consult with the researchers who are presenting you with evidence to draft better laws, to make actual improvements to the material conditions of some of our most marginalized in society, human trafficking victims. I'm Kara. I'm a local nurse. I'm co-chair of the Tampa Bay chapter of the Democratic Socialists of America, and I stand in solidarity with the Sex Worker Solidarity Network, an organization with boots on the ground in this matter who are providing evidence and all the necessary information that you need to help end human trafficking and empower victims to stand up against their oppressors.
That's tough to follow. Thanks, Kara. I just want to close on a few things. We've gone over many times how this is just further disenfranchising already marginalized communities. We've talked extensively about the racial disparity in enforcement. We already know that the spas on Kennedy are being illegally raided by police on a regular basis. So political will for enforcement assuming this ordinance were to go through, would be profiling workers. It's racially motivated. I want to talk about the fact that this ordinance has presented no evidence as to how it will impact human trafficking victims positively. We have research from the National Statistics Network, or National Survivors Network, Freedom Network USA, Amnesty International, that tell us what a real solution would look like. We've looked at this extensively, like I've said. It's the not in my backyard approach. What we're doing is we're saying we don't like the way these businesses look, we might not like the way they operate, so we're going to find a way to kick them out. Just like we do with the war on drugs, when we arrest drug addicts instead of providing compassionate care. Just like we do with the houseless, when we create anti-tent ordinances so that they can't stay and sleep where they lay their heads at night. This doesn't make the houseless any less houseless. And it certainly doesn't, arresting drug addicts doesn't make drug addicts any less addicted to drugs. Why can't we learn from these mistakes and empower victims? The only solution, one that would really work on a city level, is immunity. Under 50% of women report acts of sexual violence, specifically rape, and I know this is a very sensitive subject. Of the women on college campuses who don't report their rapes, 47% state that they didn't report it because they didn't want anybody to know. Amnesty International tells us that victims feel empowered to come forward when their identities aren't going to be released. That's something that helps all women and all victims of sexual violence, coercion, violence in general, even domestic violence. We want to see this solution because we know it's the only lifeline we can throw on a city level that's going to truly empower victims to come forward. An anonymous tip line, and immunity for people who want to report violence against them. This will shift the model that allows human traffickers to prey on our streets with impunity. We can turn that around by actually letting the victims tell us who's victimizing them. So we're waiting for the city on that one. That's about all I have if anybody else wants to jump in. Julie? All right.
Everyone before me has spoken really well, so hopefully I can follow that well. My name is Julie. I'm co-founder and an organizer with Sex Worker Solidarity Network. I'm also a member of the Democratic Socialists of America, the Communist League of Tampa, and I've also done some work with the Sex Worker Outreach Project. I'm here today regarding the Bathhouse Ordinance that the City Council is proposing and will be voting on January 11th at City Hall. This ordinance is marketed as a solution to the real issue of human trafficking, yet in addition to offering no practical solution to the problem, it is ridden with ethical flaws, such as proposals that include surveillance of marginalized communities and unnecessary restrictions that will directly affect businesses that are already up to date. This ordinance will enable further harassment from the armed thugs employed by the City of Tampa, commonly referred to as police, with mandatory raids. It proposes compulsory client registries and expensive permits with a 10-day, unheard of 10-day window for appeals, and these bureaucrats and their supporters wonder why we oppose this. And on top of the clear ethical violations inherent to this ordinance that the ignorant members of the City Council and their support staff seem to misunderstand, on top of that, this unacceptable oppression is being funded with taxpayer money. Furthermore, this Band-Aid on a gunshot wound that's masquerading as a piece of legitimate legislation, if they've really been working on this for months, then that's absolutely pathetic, and we need better public servants on the City Council than what we've got. As a result of the combination of all of this, I frankly have no confidence that the City Council will do the ethical and just thing and throw out this ordinance. I hope so, but I doubt it. I have no confidence because I fully expected nothing but closed ears and minds, willful ignorance, and inexcusable complacency from career politicians and bureaucrats. Again, they are public servants, yet they sit at their desks and look down at us and leave in the middle of a council meeting and then call us disrespectful for stepping out after feeling drained and aggravated, after speaking out and waiting around all morning to do so. These self-righteous bureaucrats expected us to wait around all day and twiddle our thumbs while we wait to be graced with their presence. Newsflash, council members, we have lives and jobs to get to, something you might not understand since you felt it acceptable to leave during the public comments. It is crystal clear that we are not respected. It is obvious that they see us as nothing more than a bunch of rabble-rousers with nothing of interest to say. Well, the fact of the matter is that regardless of what happens on Thursday at City Hall, we aren't going to stop until human trafficking is properly addressed through sensible legislation that does not further oppress and harass already marginalized groups, and we will not rest until safety, justice, and equality is achieved for all members of the working class, including sex workers. Decriminalization of sex work, for example, this is my personal opinion, will enable transparency. Realistic? Maybe, maybe not, but first we need to end the stigma, crush moral puritanism, crush moral panic, crush class oppression, fuck the complacent bureaucrats in the city council. If we do not have justice, there will not be peace. We as a collective demand immediate recognition of this indisputable fact. Sex work is real work.
I know we're not extremely optimistic about City Council's response, but I think that with all of the support we've been getting and everybody who's out here right now, if we flood their inboxes, we might get a response. So I want everybody to take out their phones, and we're going to give a call to City Council. I think we need to start with Mike Suarez. So I gave everybody a flyer right now. We're going to call that number. So, Mike Suarez, we're going to call his number right now. That phone number is 813-274-7072. I'm certain nobody's going to answer, but go ahead and leave a message. Your talking points are right there on the flyer. It's okay. Leave a message. Mike Suarez, my name is Sydney Eastman. I'm calling to oppose the Bathhouse Ordinance that criminalizes victims, further disenfranchises communities of color, enables sex traffickers, misuses taxpayer funds, encourages discrimination tactics, and targets small businesses. I'm encouraging you to please oppose this ordinance, change your stance, do what the community wants you and begs for you to do. Thank you.